Good morning, everyone.
I was like, do you know we're on?
For the dead stare, we were communicating with our digital department. Yes, it is Tuesday. Thank you for joining us here on Extra Shot. We got a little extra shot of love with us here on the couches today, Miss Irene Cruz. We're going to dive into the first topic because it has everything to do with your university, where you graduated from. You actually worked in the admissions office of California University, Irvine?
University of California, Irvine.
There you go. UCI, just down up the road from where I went to school. So in the greater Southern California region, but something devastating has happened there for a lot of the incoming freshmen or the freshmen who thought they were going to attend the university. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so 500 incoming freshman students have apparently had their acceptances, their offers of acceptance rescinded. So what's going on there is basically UCI had more students accepting the offer than what they thought. So I think more than 850 students over capacity of what they wanted to have for the freshman class. So they're telling students, if you didn't have your transcripts in on time, there's a big problem. Your offer is going to be rescinded. So that's the problem. A lot of families really angry about this. Students obviously are too.
Yeah.
And so UCI is basically saying, okay, we're going to look at all of these transcripts again. We'll try and go through all the appeals by the end of this week. But obviously, it's a big
some of those, was it over 100, have been okay.
117, I think.
117 said, okay, we reevaluated everything, all the documents that came in. You guys will be accepted after all and be able to come. This one really struck a nerve with me though, because as Cornelia said, that I said multiple times this morning, it is the education. It's the education on the line here. Because you want to compare this to the airlines, right? And a lot of people will say, well, it's the same thing. The airlines are overbooking because they think that people are going, according to studies that they've done, research that they've conducted, not everyone will show up to the airline, so they overbook because at the end of the day, it is a business and they want that plane to be full and for them to take off and have a full capacity plane. Same thing for these universities. I understand from a business perspective why they say, okay, we're going to put all of these admissions letters out there.
Right. Let's
be real. A lot of the kids are going to say, okay, UCI was one of the options. Great university. The anteaters, a lot of people want to go to that university. What do they focus on specifically? What's the school known for?
I asked that earlier too.
Yeah.
What's it known for?
My friend graduated with a biology major and then went back to get her master's in nursing. So I know it focuses. There's a lot of focus on the sciences. It's not so much
science and business mostly.
In business, okay. A lot of kids want to go to that school, highly sought after university. But a lot of the kids have options. If they get into UCI, you're hitting a certain caliber in terms of how smart you are. So you have options, I'm sure. So not everyone's going to say, hey, take that acceptance letter. But for whatever reason, UCI put out so many letters, and it just so happened that kids wanted to go there as well. They accept and they go, oh, wait. Now we're saying, okay, and this isn't uncommon.
Well, and I think that's where I learned something here, because I didn't realize that they did this. I didn't realize that schools did send out more than they are able to accept. And so in my opinion, one of the reasons why I asked what's the school known for a lot of the people who want to stay in state, so let's talk about California specific residents who want to stay in state, save some money. Maybe they have a scholarship that they have specifically got because they want to stay in state and save money. So now these students who wanted to go there for their, say, sciences program, there might not be another option for them in state, especially if they wanted to start out right away with, maybe they took some AP credits and some other classes that were some, IB courses that were going to get them in early to try to get on the right track right away. Now their other options are what? It's so late in the game. Maybe a JC, maybe they try to go to a different school in state if they can, but is it too late for them to get into another school now? I mean, we're coming up on fall.
Yeah, it's almost fall, and a lot of community colleges do a later enrollment, but if you're planning to go to UC Irvine, you're not thinking about going to a community college. It's just not on the table for you. You already started buying your dorm stuff. So I understand it, but when I first heard the story, I immediately was like, oh, it's about the money. Because again, yes, more students apply. As a student, I only applied to 2 schools because I knew exactly where I wanted to go, but I have friends who applied to 5, 6, 7 schools. And as an institution of higher learning, okay, schools, students apply to multiple places. So if we accept all of these people, it's most likely they will say, hey, I want to go to another school, and I want to go to another school. So you're just looking at law of averages. So it seems like I'm surprised we haven't seen something this big happen.
Yeah.
In the past, right?
Because they qualified to get in.
Yeah, because you qualified to get in, and you never know where people are going to lean, where students are going to lean. So one year could be 7. Like one school had seven people who they were over 7 people, and now we have 800. So
That's a lot. Well, think about the demand for all these UC schools. UC Irvine in the past couple or so years has been going up and up in terms of demand compared to the other UC schools, becoming more popular. So I think that plays a factor. And I also wanted to talk about what exactly UCI is doing. So in this case, they're cracking down on the rules that already existed. So you have to have your transcripts, your documentation in by a certain date. What they're doing is they're rescinding the offers to those who didn't do that, right?
Okay.
So in some of these cases, when I used to work in the admissions office, some of these cases, the transcripts, the names don't necessarily match up with a transcript that came from another university that you attended, or maybe you came from a different country and your names are a little bit different there. So in that case, the student is not at fault if the transcripts are there, but it's just not organized correctly.
Right.
But what if the students did not have their documentation in on time? They did not follow the rules. Do they deserve to be rescinded in this case?
Well, why did UCI accept them?
Right,
in the first place? Like, there obviously was a low standard to say, okay, if maybe you just have to hit a certain SAT score. I'm sure this didn't happen, but if they say, okay, you just have to hit this, so all the kids who applied who had that score or higher were then sent an acceptance letter, I would think the day I got my acceptance letter to the dream university, well, to the university of my dreams rather, it was the biggest moment. I can't imagine if USC came back a couple of weeks, months later and said, sorry, we're going to have to take back this acceptance letter, because that's where I'm a little confused as to what happened there. How about if I did send in my transcript? How about if I did everything the right way?
Right. And the other thing, I know earlier I said let's focus more on in-state. Now let's talk about out-of-state. You know, you have somebody from Colorado who's planning to come to California. You have somebody from New York, from Florida, from Jersey, and they're told 3 to 4 weeks out, by the way, we don't have room for you. It could have been the student's fault. Maybe they didn't send the transcript in correctly, but they were accepted.
But they were accepted.
So they're under the notion that what they did do was sufficient and that it worked enough to get them in. And so my whole thing is I'm sure UC Irvine is going to make it right to a certain extent. I understand though, if you're over capacity, if you have an obligation to your students as incoming freshmen to be able to provide housing and you cannot do that, and that's an obligation, that's an issue. The other thing with this is the ratio of professors to students.
You don't want a 60, 80, 90% class, which in some cases you do if you're in the large lecture hall.
Yes, and for the people who are going there to get this education, they expect to be working with, you know, a professor and their assistant one-on-one on certain things, and to have a class that is 40% bigger now, that's going to change their experience. So I understand they're in a bind. I'm just, as you said, I'm surprised that so many more people were allowed in than what they can accept. That was a huge number to hear, 800
Are you more surprised by that, or more surprised maybe all universities do this and for whatever reason just more people wanted to go to UCI this year? Are you more surprised that, like, what does UCI have in their pamphlet that says come to our university? Because has to be some reason why
it was so much more.
So many more kids all of a sudden this year wanted to go more than they anticipated or expected. Is a celebrity going there? Like, what's
or maybe it was just their time. Sometimes stuff is bound to happen. Stuff is bound to hit the fan, and sometimes there's no explanation for it. Maybe it was just as simple as, hey, every year we accept this amount of students. Every year this many students apply. Every year we kind of deal with this ratio, and this year it kind of just donut and it just backfired, and now they're dealing with this. Because again, if every year you know students are going to not accept the offer, as a business, you got to make sure that you have butts in the seats, enough people. So you're going to play with the numbers a little bit. And this probably isn't their first time at the rodeo. I think this was just a bad year.
And on that note too, you know, you think about, if you are a student and you see the qualifications online, you have to have a 3.75 GPA, you have to have this score on your SAT, you have to be involved in this many clubs. If you check all those boxes, you expect you get in, right? You send in the application fee, you send in all the documentation you need with your transcripts, everything. And you expect, I've met everything, now I get in. is there a disclaimer somewhere saying we have a quota? Like,
well, there's going to have to be, or else I think these kids can take some legal action, right? To say, hey, we were going to this university, we paid this dollar amount. I'm sure they're going to reimburse them at the very least.
Because now what does this do to their future education?
Yeah, this sets them back an entire year, or a semester. And the other thing is, why couldn't UCI, and again, we don't want to accuse UCI if they are trying to work this out.
And I'm sure they are.
I hope they are. I'm sure they're in crisis mode right now, but okay, so I understand. You can't go build up a dorm facility, you know, between now and fall semester. I get that. So you can't create more room for these students. But and I don't know. I don't know how easy or hard it is to hire a professor for said subject. But you can make room for the students in the classroom, I would think, at a much easier rate than you can provide housing. So then maybe you provide an option to say, I know we messed up. We are 1 month out. I don't want to rob you of your education, but we just don't have the room for housing. Maybe it's a partnership they're going to have to work out with the local apartments and condos or housing facilities around town. I don't know, but I just feel like they need to provide an option for the mere sake of providing an education, because UCI has one job and one job only, and that is to educate our future. I would think that they want to provide that for our students. And plus they'll get money if the kids are going to the school. They're not going for free.
Right.
They're paying to go to the university and take the courses. I'm surprised at that. Aren't you going to do whatever you can to make sure you're getting the money if this is about business?
Yeah, and I'm seeing your comments. I also see Ralph said, how many out-of-state students did they turn away? In-state should be the last to turn away. And to that note, not knowing the percentage exactly of in-state versus out-of-state for UCI, I have done stories on UC Davis, UCLA, other UC schools. And they are a money-making business, right?
It's a business.
Out of state, out of country tuition, they're going to pay the big bucks. So now I'm interested to see how many in-state potentially students were part of this. Sorry, we can't let you in. Are they making room for the out-of-state students who are going to pay more in tuition? That's my follow-up question to UCI, and hopefully, you know, I know probably for privacy rules we won't know every answer, but that is a story we've done in the past. Is that unfortunately the in-state students, the money isn't there as much, which is horrible, so because students should be able to get an education,
and it's still expensive in-state as well. That's the kicker. So maybe the conversation is this, and yes, it shouldn't have to come to this, and yes. Unfortunately for these students, they are put in a tight spot. School starts in 3-4 weeks. So you're pretty much, it's over. Not saying it's over, but you needed to have a backup plan a couple of months ago.
So none of these guys did.
So with the rise in people pursuing college degrees, with now you have the switch in jobs and opportunities where in a lot of industries, you can't just get a job with a high school diploma the way you could back in the day. A lot of careers and a lot of positions require some college at minimum. So now maybe the conversation to our young people when they are applying to schools is, yes, I understand you have a first choice. And yes, I understand maybe you do want to go here and this is your option. But because everybody is enrolling and everybody's trying to go to school, we need to have backup plans in case something blows up in your face.
And then a month later you aren't. If you're wanting to be a nurse, you start that program freshman year. I know you get your GEDs out of the way, and in 2 years you can knock them out of the JC ideally. But realistically, if you want to get into journalism, if you want to get into a nursing program, and I'm not naming a ton of programs where you can start taking those what do you call them, the course, like the entry level courses,
course requirements.
The course requirements for that said prereqs for that said subject. Like, you start that freshman year, and then this also affects internship opportunities. I know where I went, USC, students are interning at the freshman level. I was a transfer student. They didn't allow that at my state university at San Diego State. So when I transferred in, kids had been interning since freshman year. I fell behind because at state they wouldn't allow me to intern until I was a senior.
Wow.
So when I got to SC, I was playing catch up. I was having multiple internships a semester because it was like, I'm now competing at this different level within the journalism and comm department. So I just worry for that generation of kids. But you're right, Cornelia, so many more kids now are getting an education and figuring out ways in which they can go get a higher education, which isn't a bad problem to have, but universities need to figure it out.
David Wong, I see your comment. Hi, thanks for being with us again today. A loyal viewer. David said, I first attended college more than 30 years ago. I think this is the first time I have heard of overbooking college admittance. And I hadn't really heard of that either. My final question to parents, though, and to everyone out there who has been down this road, even if you have a backup, a month out, a backup isn't going to work. No. I mean, if you have a secondary plan, you needed to make plans this close to the start of this school year that would have already been your backup plan would have already been done.
You have to give out the statement of intent to register at a different school. And that had documentation.
So then there's all your other chances.
Before,
yeah. It's not like you can just sign up all of a sudden and say, hey, I'm coming to your university.
Yeah.
So if you guys know of anybody who this has ever happened to, this is my first time hearing of an overbooking like this, at least that resulted in such a big group of students. Let us know. Maybe we can do a specific story on you today. We've got our ABC 10 reporters in a meeting now, and they're discussing what they're going to do for the day. But good follow-up to see if this is something that's impacted anyone else.
Did you read Janet Piper's comment?
Not this last one.
Okay, so maybe next year they can send out notices saying it's first come, first serve with all qualifications met. Then the students won't limit themselves to just one option. So if they know, let's see, okay, so the first come, first serve, they send in their admittance letter, and then what?
And then she's saying when you apply to the school, just know that you have to apply early, because if you're one of the last even though the booking window is from January to March, if you wait until March, it's first come, first serve.
Okay, so but then you get the letter saying that you got in, and then you proceed with your planning.
Yeah, and I took it as first come, first serve, meaning yes, I accept you, Megan and Irene, but first come, first serve. So Irene, if Irene sends her letter saying yes, I am definitely coming, that's first. Megan, you're out. So it's kind of like, we accepted all of these people.
But once you get word from the university, then shouldn't that be like?
But you still have to let them know that you're coming. Yes, they can accept you, but you still have to say, thanks for accepting me, I'm coming. So once you tell them you're coming, maybe it's first come, first serve on that regard, saying, I'm definitely coming, sign me up for a dorm, this is my deposit that I have to put down, because you got to send all your money in. And maybe that is maybe then we're going by the number count off of that basis.
From my understanding, though, with this story, these students had already said they were going? No, not necessarily. That they got the letter saying that you were admitted, but by the time they came around and said, okay, here's my transcript and all of that, then the school said sorry, and they had already said no to the other universities, so that those students didn't wait for that complete loop to be finished.
I think that is how it went. I'm not 100% sure.
Because then that changes it a little bit. Why would you say, I mean, you have to fully complete that circle before you say no to the other universities, right? I would think.
I don't know. We're getting in the weeds now. I don't know that spot of it, but
I just think that's interesting.
I'm really curious to know how other universities are going to respond after this, how they're going to change their policies, how many students they're going to officially accept each year now. Are they going to leave a bigger gap for students who...
Or not let as many in.
Maybe not.
Maybe they just have to say, when you're applying to a school, I know we did a story on, was it Harvard a couple weeks ago, where they only let like 2,500 people in, and they have like 80,000 people apply every year. Like they can't, even if you qualified, there are thousands and thousands of people who, even if you met qualifications for whatever reason, maybe it was a first come, first serve. The first people to get in and get accepted, that's it. So I think it's just, now we know how competitive these schools are and how important education is to so many of our youth right now. And by the way, the millennial generation, biggest generation in the world now, above baby boomers.
Oh, yeah.
So there are many more people trying to get into colleges, and there's not necessarily a rise in the number of colleges that's equal to the amount of people trying to go to college now. So
supply and demand. Wow.